One of the biggest questions that we're asked is what's the difference between a BIBS system and a continuous flow oxygen system? What's the difference? How does it work? What makes them different? And why should you even care? So let's break it down. So before we compare the two, just want to establish a quick foundation. The chamber is actually just a vessel, right? And so what we're actually doing, it's two fundamental treatments. It's oxygen and pressure. They're two separate treatments. And for hyperbaric oxygen therapy to be effective, you need both. Some chambers in the wellness space, they actually don't use an oxygen concentrator. They just pressurize with ambient air. And they actually don't have a dedicated oxygen line at all, right? And when I say dedicated oxygen line, there's no concentrator that's pumping 93 to 99% oxygen into the chamber. What it's actually doing is taking the outside air, pumping it into the chamber, so oxygen is still at 21%, and you're just breathing in that ambient air. Albeit you are absorbing some oxygen, but there's minimal oxygen for it to be therapeutically effective according to the published research and data. Not saying that everyone doesn't get results with it, but it's fundamentally a different therapy. It's just hyperbaric therapy, right? So if you're looking at different chamber options, if you're exploring what's on the market, if you're trying different units, the first thing you want to ask is, does this have a dedicated oxygen line? If it doesn't, then it's not hyperbaric oxygen therapy, it's just hyperbaric therapy. Pressure has its own results. We can cover that in another video. But this is the fundamental distinction between these two kinds of systems. The real divide is just having one that actually provides oxygen and not. Okay, so let's look at a continuous flow oxygen system. So a continuous flow system takes ambient air, runs it through an oxygen concentrator through several filters, and it extracts 93 to 99% oxygen. It then pumps that oxygen into the chamber, which the user breathes. So when you're in the chamber in a continuous flow system, depending on your mask that you're wearing, you're breathing anywhere between 30 to 90% of fraction-inspired oxygen. So that's actually traditionally called FiO2, and this is the percentage of oxygen that a person's actually breathing in. So the NRB system delivers 60 to 90% FiO. That also means the patient is inhaling 60 to 90% oxygen. For context, normal room air is about 21%, which is the mix with everything else that we've got going on. So a quick explanation on the different mask systems, as this is going to drastically change how much fractional inspired oxygen you're actually breathing. You might have seen these three different kinds of masks in your hyperbaric unit. You've got this nose prong mask, which just goes into your nose. You have a Hudson mask, and you have an NRB mask. Each has a different rate of oxygen efficiency. How much oxygen are you actually breathing in? Now, if we just think about this from first principles, if you've got these two little prongs going into your nose, well, you're not going to get that much oxygen into your body, right? Because you're just inhaling, right? Only so much can get through those two little prongs, and you're not really taking a massive breath of oxygen, which is going to reduce the amount of oxygen that you're absorbing per session in your hyperbaric chamber. So these typically anywhere between 30 to 50%, can be lower. These are just averages. A lot of chambers have what's called a Hudson mask. Now, this is 50 to 70% based on averages. This is where oxygen is pumped through this line and it comes directly out of the mask, just like a Ventolin mask. Now, the best mask for a continuous flow system is it actually fills up this bag and you breathe out of this bag. And so the variables come from how the mask is fit, if you're clean shaven, if you've got other things going on your face. This is all going to influence how much oxygen you're absorbing per breath and how efficient the overall system is. This is what most clinics run, and for good reason. It's very simple. The best solution here is using the bag, as you know that that's always going to be filling up with oxygen and you're breathing that oxygen out. If you're treating someone or if you have people coming in and out of the clinic, you just want to make sure you have good processes on how to fit the mask properly. And so the client or patient also knows what to do if they adjust the mask and it comes off their face or something like this. This is going to come very important just later on. Now, what this continuous flow system is going to do, it's going to continually pump oxygen into the chamber, which you'll continually breathe in and out. On every exhale, you're going to be breathing the excess oxygen and CO2 back into the chamber. So to summarize, a continuous flow system will continually pump oxygen into the chamber, which you will breathe. And then when you breathe out, it's CO2 and whatever oxygen is left over goes back into the chamber. Now let's compare this to a BIBS system. This is called a built-in breathing system. So it's the same setup where you have oxygen concentrator scrubbing the atmosphere, pumping oxygen in, but it's actually a closed loop. And when I say closed loop, that means oxygen comes in, and on the exhale, CO2 and excess oxygen comes out. And so it works like this. This is a bib mask. You have two hoses, just like this gentleman is wearing here. Every time you inhale, there's a small membrane that opens up on the pressure of your inhalation. That opens up the oxygen tank, which you breathe in oxygen, right? And then when you breathe out, that tank closes shut, that membrane reacts and closes, and it exhausts carbon dioxide out of the chamber. This BIBS system delivers anywhere between 98 to 99 fractional inspired oxygen because you're breathing in 100% oxygen on every inhale, and then when you exhaust out, carbon dioxide is going directly out. So you're not mixing your inhalation with ambient air within the chamber. You've got the guarantee that every time you inhale, you know you're breathing 100% oxygen. Fundamentally, it's a more advanced system. Every time you inhale, that puts tension onto that diaphragm. That diaphragm opens up, which then opens up the oxygen flow from the concentrator. And then when you stop breathing in, it closes, meaning no more oxygen is coming into your face or into the chamber. Practically, what does this mean? It means that you can have a beard, anyone can use this mask, and you can always be sure that you're always getting 99% oxygen efficiency per session. That also means that there's no ambient air dilution within the chamber. So if we want to look at this from a safety perspective, if you're really comparing apples for apples here, the continuous flow system does accumulate CO2 in the chamber, does accumulate small amounts of oxygen into the chamber, which then increases the fire risk, increases the overall risk of this system. However, in practicality, these amounts are minute. It is still something to be monitoring when someone's in the chamber as well. However, in practical use cases, it's minimal. However, safety precautions should always be taken for anyone in a continuous flow as well as a BIB system. When I say safety precautions, no electronic devices, cotton clothing, no static electricity, these kinds of things. You don't really want to be bringing flammable devices into a chamber that has oxygen accumulating into it. Here's something most people don't really think about. With a continuous flow system, around 10 to 15 liters of oxygen is being pumped into that chamber per minute. But your actual breathing only draws in anywhere between 6 to 10 liters per minute, and only during inhalation. Everything else, the oxygen flowing into the chamber that leaks around the mask, starts to change the ambient air within the hyperbaric chamber. That's why we recommend using an NRB mask, as the oxygen actually fills up this bag first before it escapes out of the mask and into the ambient air of the chamber itself. Plus, you get a more efficient oxygen delivery system overall. With BIBS, zero oxygen actually enters the hyperbaric environment. And this isn't really a small distinction because oxygen-enriched environments are a primary fire concern in hyperbaric therapy. So a general guideline is the US Navy generally sets 25% maximum oxygen saturation within a chamber for this reason. BIBS eliminates this variable completely. So look, let's compare these two systems, BIBS and continuous flow. Both deliver real hyperbaric oxygen therapy. One has a higher upfront investment, given that it's a more advanced system, but the continuous flow has a lower upfront cost. BIBS is operationally superior with lower oxygen waste, and it has zero mask fit variability. Whereas the continuous flow system, the variable is the mask fit. Staff or whoever's using the system needs to know how to fit the mask on to maximize oxygen efficiency, as well as use the appropriate mask to make the most out of their session. It's just good to know the distinction between them, as this will help you build your own internal processes and systems to get better outcomes for either yourself or people you work with. Neither is the wrong choice. BIBS is obviously superior and safer. However, no oxygen system at all really is the wrong choice. For most people just getting started at home, or if they're getting started in a clinic or a business, continuous flow is often a common starting point before they start to build up to a built-in breathing system if they're treating a wider audience of people. Now, a quick point worth knowing is the concentrator needs to overcome the back pressure coming out of the hyperbaric chamber, right? So if these pump, say, 10 to 15 liters a minute, right? That's how much oxygen is being pumped into this chamber. Well, the chamber is under pressure. So it has all this force trying to push air out. So it's really important that this concentrator is designed for a hyperbaric chamber because it needs to overcome this back pressure to maintain flow into the system. Otherwise, you'll find that when you're in the chamber and you don't have the correct concentrator, you can't feel any air coming in. Or if it's a BIBS system, when you inhale, there's no air able to come in because it can't push past this back pressure. You got to remember that this is a pressurized environment, so it wants to push air out. That's why at the end of a chamber session, when you turn the release valve or it starts depressurizing, all the air is rushing out. So all that air that wants to rush out, that's a force that the concentrator needs to overcome to get sufficient oxygen at 10 to 15 liters a minute to overcome this back pressure so you can breathe it and really get the true results of the therapy. So that's a quick guide on the two different oxygen systems most hyperbaric chambers have. If it doesn't have either of these systems, well, it's not hyperbaric oxygen therapy. And if you guys want to see some of the research that we've got, we have a full research library of peer-reviewed data, aggregated per condition, so you can filter and find the right protocol or study that makes sense for your use case. Thanks for watching. I'll catch you on the next one.